Chief Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Officer at NASA has been fired despite the space agency reportedly changing her designation to avoid US President Donald Trump's crackdown on DEI initiatives.
This is not an isolated incident. In fact, several of the biggest names have either cut back on their DEI spends or rolled back initiatives.
So in case you missed it, companies like Meta, Amazon, Walmart, and even McDonald's in the US have recently announced major cutbacks in their diversity, equity, and inclusion or DEI initiatives.
But not everyone has decided to tread this path.
Apple shareholders have rejected a proposal that would have scrapped the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. A conservative think tank drafted the plan to remove the company's diversity resources. It wanted Apple to join a wave of major companies who are ending their programs. But Apple shareholders voted overwhelmingly in favor of keeping the initiatives in place, with 97% of ballots cast against the plan to remove DEI.
At the crux of it all is an acronym, DEI, which stands for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. Something that on the face of it doesn't seem controversial at all. Who'd want to oppose this, right? Wrong.
We believe that whether you are a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, or an air traffic controller, you should be hired and promoted based on skill and competence, not race or gender. The poison of critical race theory from our public schools, and I signed an order making it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
That was US President Donald Trump addressing a joint session of Congress a month ago where he reiterated his stance on scrapping DEI policies. But what does any of this have to do with India? Has DEI really taken off in the Indian context? Is it restricted more to multinational companies rather than Indian firms? Is DEI a concept that is only being adopted by tech firms? Are more traditional businesses warming up to it? How does the Trump administration's take on DEI impact companies in India? Are companies rolling back on projects now? Does that spell trouble for firms that help companies with their DEI initiatives? Does DEI really help to better a company's bottom line? We explore all of this and more in today's episode, where we speak to an ace DEI practitioner and consultant, as well as a hiring whiz on all things diversity and inclusion in Indian workplaces. It's Tuesday, April 22nd. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you are listening to The Morning Brief from the Economic Times. Let's start with some context setting. Donald Trump's second term has been nothing short of tumultuous and full of twists and turns. It all started with him signing executive orders like they were going out of fashion. One such order was passed on January 20th, which said that the Biden administration had forced illegal and immoral discrimination programs going by the name of DEI into virtually all aspects of the federal government in areas ranging from airline safety to the military. The White House in its communication said, and I quote, "Nearly every federal agency and entity submitted equity action plans to detail the ways that they have furthered DEI's infiltration of the federal government. The public release of these plans demonstrated immense public waste and shameful discrimination. That ends today." End quote. This was a huge policy shift, and in many ways a reversal of another executive order that brought in DEI as a concept. Here's Ishani Roy, founder and CEO of DEI consultancy Serene, talking about how DEI not only came into being, but also taking us through what all of this means for companies in India. Thank you once again for joining us on the Morning Brief. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. before we dive into what is happening today, I just wanted to know if you could give us a brief history of how DEI really came into being. Just something for our listeners to sort of have as a context.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast here. Lovely to be on. I think I love your question, how DEI came into being. So if you look back, you can think about any country which has any of these labor mandates, right? Equal opportunities mandates. It started in the 1960s. In America, for example, it was an executive order that was passed by the president to basically say that you have to hire without regard to any religion or race or any origin. And this all came after the civil rights movement. Similar things kind of happened in India as well. We do have the equal opportunities policy, which says that any employer with more than 20 employees have to have an equal opportunities policy. So that's the basic thing of equity. Now, once again, if you think about what are the other basic things about equality, equity, or inclusion, first thing that comes to mind is safety. So, for example, if you think about how safe India is in the workplace, you will always go back to Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. So, when the Nirbhaya case happened in Delhi, there was a huge upheaval about our take sort of criminal laws, and there was change that happened to the criminal act, which is the IPC, right? And then we also got in 2013 the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. So in its basic form, you can think about it is only a few decades old when it comes to making the workplace safer and equitable.
Right, and something that you mentioned which was interesting was that it was passed through an executive order, and from then to now we have another executive order that basically scraps it. Right? So I wanted to understand from you, Ishani, how did you take the news when it first came out? I mean, it's been some time, so I'm guessing you had some time to sit and think over it. But when it first came out, what was your reaction?
Yes, I mean, that's a great question. And my first question was disbelief. I mean, this cannot happen. Even if a person or a few handful of people who are so privileged that they do not understand the need for equity or need to have a workplace or society which makes it safe and inclusive for everyone, it's just a few people. But then again, I think one of the things it's very important to think about is go deeper and understand how did this get implemented so fast. So one of the most revealing sort of discussion around this is to understand why did companies go back on the DEI programs. Obviously, a few of them did not. There are many who have stood up and said that no, we believe in equity, we believe in inclusion, but many have rolled back their resources and programs. So why did they actually do that? Was there merit in having an open conversation? That is something I think we are still kind of thinking through. So yes, we are kind of still coming to terms with it, but also there has been a reckoning in the DEI world about what is the right way of doing things.
So if I were to ask you what is the right way for doing things, what would you tell our listeners? I mean, if there is someone who owns a company out there and is thinking about possibly rolling back their DEI initiatives or not having one at all, what would you tell them?
I think this is a great question. Absolutely great question. I think what we first and foremost kind of have to understand is to forget the jargon. So forget everything about DEI. The best thing to do is understand that you have to have a team that clearly understands the different markets' needs. To be able to do that, you have to have people who represent those different markets. Now, that just translates to having a diverse set of people. And you know how to keep them and make them most productive by having an inclusive workplace. You will have a better product, you'll have a better service, end of the day, you will have better business outcome. So if you just look at any of your apps, today that you use in India, any of the food ordering apps, anything else that you see, you will see a lot of local components. So if you move around the country, you will see it changing, it's customizing itself to the language and the need of that market there. And that's being done by a diverse set of people who are constantly studying the market, right? So the fact that we are penetrating into tier 2, tier 3 cities, that's DEI for you. So people who have been able to do that for the longest time, they're just going to keep on doing it. People who did that for, more of what we call rainbow washing or what we call just for branding's sake, those are the ones who are probably going to take a step back and realize that those kind of efforts are not sustainable or really do not prove to be useful in the end.
Sure, but Ishani, everything finally boils down to the numbers, right? Especially for companies. What have you seen and what can you share with us to sort of talk about how DEI isn't just a concept and it's not something that, is just meant to be sort of, in your books as some additional thing that you do, but rather really provides and adds value to a company's bottom IVM.
Did you know Indians report nearly 800 cases of online financial fraud every day, which has resulted in losses exceeding 1,000 crores in the last 5 years? To keep you safe from such fraud, I am starting my newest podcast series, Conversation with Vigilante, an initiative by HDFC Bank. In every episode, I will feature special guests who can share expert insights on the different types of fraud, their modus operandi, and how you can protect your money. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and don't forget to tune into Conversation with Vigilante. Catch the episodes on all audio streaming platforms and V for Vigilante YouTube channel.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor, your habit coach. And today we have a very interesting episode, something that I am extremely passionate about. It is about our body and just what amazing things it is capable of doing. And we're going to understand where we are right now and what are the things that we can do. We have a guest that I've been wanting to interview for a while. I just finished reading his book. And we're going to be talking about the cutting edge of our human body. We're going to be talking to Dr. Marcus Plane. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Doctor. Right? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I loved your book, and I love the fact that you're a fellow explorer and love going to, pushing yourself to the edge to understand how your body reacts to things.
Yeah.
We all stay in metro cities, especially people listening to this podcast for sure, right? And we're not using our bodies the way probably it is capable of being used. When you see people in our metro cities, what do you think? Do you want to shake them up and tell them there's so much that you can do with your body. What are you doing right now?
The one place that really peeves me off the most is airports. I sit there, I'm walking around, I'm trying to get my step count in because can't get any on the flight. And I just look around and I wonder, what has happened to us as a species that has led to this sedentary lives, high calorific access, stressed out. Everyone is on a call, on their phone, taking the travelator or the escalator. Unfortunately, very worrying study which was just published a couple of weeks ago. In urban India, we have over 70% of our population obese and overweight. Wow, imagine that. That's a ridiculous. And our denominators are not small denominators.
Yeah, that's huge.
Right? So it's something which is usually frustrating.
Hi, bro.
I think philosophically,
Hi,
neither
bro.
you or I, align to that. We like to be outdoors. We like to enjoy everything. And so the book, when I wrote it many years ago, it's a dedication to my kids. With the hope that they fall in love with the science as much as I do, but it's also sort of hopefully my sort of seed thought to our species that look, nature and the outdoors is a beautiful place, and you can learn and enjoy so much. And here's a journey internally to get you there as well. So
Brox, you
I'm
can
glad
go
you enjoyed
and
it. I hope,
watch
many
my
people
channel,
watching this
the
will
content
listen
of
to
my
that as well,
channel.
read that as well.
And the journey for me started off very similarly to the way that you started your book,
Yeah.
which was when I was extremely unfit. I started my fitness journey, and then as my first challenge, never having trekked in my life, I decided to do EBC.
Okay.
Right, so I was on a flight to.
That was my first trek as well.
Your first.
Yeah.
So I was in Kathmandu
Yeah.
with a suitcase because I didn't have any trekking gear. There was
Alright.
no Decathlon or places to buy anything.
Right.
So bought stuff in Kathmandu on a flight to Lukla the next day. So that's how it started.
Okay. That's brave or stupid.
The goal was to fail at it.
Okay.
I
Hi,
was passing
Hawa.
through a phase where I was like, I want to fail at things right now. I'm
Yeah.
winning everything, I want to fail.
How are you?
It was a phase in my life. And that's when you suddenly start respecting the body and how it adapts, because you're there for 14 days.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere and the oxygen suddenly starts getting to you.
Yeah.
Today, sitting at sea level, what are the things that we can do to experience what our bodies can be capable of? What are the steps we should start taking?
I think there's a lot, right? I remind people that our body is a machine. And like any machine, the more you use it, the better it becomes, right? Any car, no matter what make or model or class, stuck in a garage for X number of months or years will stop working eventually just because of degeneration. And our machines are exactly the same. We've got an incredible aerobic capacity to do things, and we're living in a time where the corporate social culture is embracing marathon running, triathlons, duathlons. I think the sales of bicycles and pets went up through the pandemic, right? So people are interested in moving and getting out more. So I think that's a great way of making a first step. And some of the best runs, and I'm a part of this amazing little running community where we have people joining that have never run before, and just getting them to see their first 5 or 10K run and how exhilarated they feel. Even on the trek we're doing this summer that we were just talking about, we've got 3 people joining who have never been to altitude, and 4 people who've never done a big expedition like this before. So that's going to be an incredible experience for them, and I really enjoy being part of that journey. So I think that's a great place to start. I think the other big area, I'm not sure how many of our listeners and viewers are approaching that stage in life where the big 4-0 is a number chronologically for them. Whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, you're approaching this stage of andropause where hormones are changing, muscle mass is rapidly going to start declining, bone health is going to deteriorate at an unprecedented scale. So spending time doing resistance form, it doesn't need to be in the gym. It could be free weights, it could be the latest Instagram trend of calisthenics, etc. But making sure you're exposing and stimulating your muscles and your bone health to that, very, very important. And then the other big trend in all of this is flexibility and balance, right? It's a natural deterioration as we get older. I remember my time, I'm aging myself now, but 20 years ago almost, when I did my first orthopedic rotation, the consultant told us that anyone who comes in with a fractured neck or femur, if they're above the age of 70, they have a 70% mortality rate within that 1 year. Right? And that's not because of the break in bone, it's the secondary consequences of being immobile. Deterioration, sepsis, infection, blood clots, etc. So prevention is always going to be better than cure. Probably a theme we'll talk a lot about today. So ensuring that you have the flexibility, the balance, the muscular strength, the bone health, the aerobic capacity. These are things that we should be doing now at this stage and actually 10 years prior, so that we're laying that foundation of good habits to hold us in good stead when we get older.
And it's so interesting that there's a generation that's growing up that has so much exposure to exercise.
Yeah.
I remember when I was growing up, if I was in my 20s and I wanted to go to the gym, people would make fun of me saying, "Why do you want to become Arnold Schwarzenegger?" Right? Like that was the attitude that we had towards physical exercise in India, especially.
Yeah.
So it's lucky that I see these kids wanting to be this. You said flexibility is important.
I'll just say something there though, because I'm a big believer in the language dictates our culture and narrative. And every time somebody mentions this to me, I try and correct them, which is people still use the phrase fitness freak.
Right.
And I immediately remind them, and I said, freak is something which we associate with a negativity. Why don't we call it some sort of passion, and fitness enthusiast or fitness lover instead?
Correct.
so that we put a positive spin on that narrative.
But it's my pet peeve as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Ashton, you're a fitness freak. No, dude, I'm doing the normal thing. You are lazy. Like change the narrative.
Yeah.
It's the same way when people get on a nutrition plan.
Right.
You're like, why are you trying to be this diet person? No, dude, I'm just like eating like a normal person.
Yeah. Again, I never use the word diet. I'll always talk about fuel. Once you understand your machine, fuel is critical to movement and just expenditure, and then it changes the way you think about what you put inside of your body.
How do you talk about nutrition in today's day and age? When like probably nutrition and religion are the two biggest like firecrackers that you can start talking about. Like everything you say is going to be bounced on.
Yeah. Especially on social media.
On social media, especially. Like, how do you decide what to eat? It's like the strangest thing.
So I keep it really simple, right? For me, it's got to be sustainable, i.e., you should be able to do it for your entire lifetime, and therefore it's not a fad which you'll do for a few weeks and then be onerous and drop out. And it's got to be sustainable from a climate perspective as well. Big challenge facing all of us is going to be what's going to happen to our planet in the next few years and decades. So keeping it local, keeping it seasonal, organic practices where possible, being as much towards plant-based as possible. These are things that help from a sustainability from a climate perspective. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is balancing the macros. So I'm not obsessed about calories. Calories is just a unit of energy measurement. But an apple and a chocolate bar can have the same number of calories. One we know is clearly good for you, one is not. So balancing macros, understanding your body's needs based upon your expenditures, and therefore what you're putting in from